This is an unusual runway analysis episode where I took all of the looks from this season, I posted them to my Instagram stories, and then you all looked at them and told me what you thought, and I compiled all of those comments into a massive document that we are now going to read over together. Like every season of Loewe, there are more ideas here than you could possibly unpack at a single time. This was an unusual season because usually when we do runway analyses as a group, we're able to kind of go through look by look and sort of unpack all the little references. That is not how Jonathan works at all. Like such as, for example, this looks like bedding that someone would wear when they're going to the toilet in the middle of the night, just like something that you throw on and quickly run to the bathroom and then go back to bed and just try not to be cold. All of the huge leather pieces that in person were just incredibly stiff, such that you could take them on a hanger, like turn them sideways, and the whole thing would just like zoop. We got a ton of people saying that this reminded them of Polly Pocket. They do just sort of look like clothes that would go onto an action figure or a Barbie or something, but specifically we got dozens of people saying Polly Pocket in particular. Compared to how bombastic the other looks are, this one is really easy to miss, but this jumper clearly doesn't fit right. And the person that submitted this said that it looked like the bottom only had been run through a hot wash and dry cycle. A lot of people were marveling at this dress in particular, most people just being like, how on earth is that staying up? And we're not gonna do a ton of commentary from me on this, but I did go to the showroom, so since it is such a mystery, I do feel like I have somewhat of an obligation to clear this up. They've done a bit of a trick of the eye here. I believe this is a normal strapless dress. It's being held up by tension in this area. But it really does trick your eye. I mean, it really looks like the whole dress is somehow magically being held up by this floating ball. One person in particular pointed out that there was an uncanny resemblance between this dress and the Vivienne Westwood Melissa collaboration. They were called the Lady Dragon heels. One very wise commentator pointed out that this has a striking resemblance to Dragonair. And we had multiple guys that replied to this and were like super sheepish about saying what they thought, and they were like, I think we all, I think it's pretty clear. I don't have to say it. So I will say it. This looks like a clitoris. The way that the dress is and the ball at the top, instead, it does look like a clitoris. Good job, guys. We found it. And every once in a while, we get these really wonderful comments that aren't necessarily pointing out a reference, but they just explain it really well. I'm gonna read this here. This dress is just drape heaven. From the bodice to even the hem being swallowed by the draping of the dress. It reminds me of a bed sheet and pinning it as a gown when we were kids, and how it can be a beautiful thing in theory, or finally the fashion show all of us girls used to walk in our bedrooms finally being predictable and commercialized. That's very poetic. Really good job on that one. Okay, we're gonna do a hard gear shift here and go into the meat of this show, which is the Trompe Loewe looks, which were spread all the way throughout the show and which we just had an enormous amount of excellent commentary on. Okay, so just baseline, what are we looking at? These are a series of dresses that all seem to be using the same fabric that have a Trompe Loewe print on them, most of which are blurred. Let's get into it. We had hundreds of excellent comments from our fashion historians saying that this was pretty clearly a reference back to Margiela's Spring-Summer 1996 collection, where he bought vintage clothes, took photographs of them, and printed those pictures onto plain silk shifts. But no, I mean, there is a long history of Trompe Loewe in fashion that definitely should not be ignored, and it's not all necessarily a Margiela reference, but Margiela was one of the biggest cultural moves forward with that and using it as storytelling rather than just a cool effect. One other person said, I know this is a Margiela reference, but it also strongly reminds me of the Celine Eve Klein dress. And that was one Phoebe Philo Celine show where they seemingly got a model, put them in international Klein blue paint, and then just sort of did like a whole body finger paint thing. Like, you know, where you put your hand in paint and then you put it on the paper and turn it into a turkey. It's like that, but with like your whole body. And that was, of course, based off of an existing Yves Klein painting. One person went in a little bit of a different direction and said, to me, the obvious hint at these light dresses is Eastern European grandmother dresses. Ones that they still wear with floral prints. The fading is telling me that this kind of practice is getting less and less common and perhaps fading away. And then that person included a picture of their own grandmother wearing one such dress, which they said that I could use because they cropped their grandmother's face out of it. You have an adorable grandmother, and ma'am, I must say, that cake looks excellent. An entirely different person pointed out the same thing, saying, growing up with very much Eastern European influence, this dress really made me think about the tablecloth that my parents had at their house. In Eastern European culture, these type of tablecloths with this type of flowers and colors are very common. Other people pointed out that this bore a striking resemblance to flower dyeing, kind of how you can sort of capture it and you can kind of tell what you're looking at, but not fully. There's still that lack of fidelity. Another quote, I feel like these prints with the horizontal blur create the effect of passing by something, not being able to perceive the whole picture or the shape. Not leaving a clear memory in your head, it's just a brief moment in time. Connecting to that, someone else said that these looked like the hazy memory of a garment that someone used to own and can't fully remember. One person said that this is maybe playing with the flatness of digital media, which I thought was a great point because so many fashion designers complain about this, that they're like, I've put my blood, sweat, and tears into this collection and I've presented it in this wonderful format. We've paid all of this money to like do this video presentation thing for you, and then you're just like, mid. Ha, bro, look at this dog. Another great comment was there's so much stuff with AI right now. Maybe these are like CAPTCHA prints. They're photocopied Trompe Loewe that AI wouldn't be able to recognize. Great comment. That is such a cool thought. This is why I love doing these so much, is because you all are able to come up with all of these different ideas and interpretations that would have never occurred to me. We had a few folks who thought there was some allusions to classical painting. Like, we do have the flowers from the famous Ophelia painting, where if you zoom in on paintings like this, you get kind of more of an impressionistic idea of a flower that's much clearer and sharper, or appears to be much clearer and sharper when you back up. Siren. That was kind of weak when it was actually passing by. We had a lot of allusions to painting. Someone said this reminded them of the photorealistic paintings from Gerhard Richter. And that same person actually said, this reminds me of Gerhard Richter's paintings of his Nazi uncle, which was based on a photograph that he had of him. The intentional blurriness of the painting has a sense of nostalgia of past family, but also the desire to wipe away an uncomfortable history. I feel like that's kind of always the dialogue that a designer has with a large house. Obviously not as deep as the whole like Nazi thing, but this idea of sort of having to look at an inevitable past and sort of continue on into the future while still dealing with the past that is there and not going away. Also, I didn't know about any of these paintings by Gerhard Richter before we started doing this. That is an incredibly unsettling painting. It's the smile, I think. The smile is very sinister. Another really great comment here. This is relevant of a duality between fake and real in this runway. Jonathan Anderson is using elements that originally come from digital reality. Like in the Balenciaga Clones runway, we can talk about the concept of hyperreality. However, Loewe's approach is different. They don't want to create a perfect illusion of reality at a point where you wouldn't see the difference between what's real and what's fake. It's more about using virtual gimmicks to give a surreal look to what we see as we wonder, are my eyes glitching somehow? The hyperreality of Jonathan Anderson isn't perfect, but seems to be fragile and on the edge of falling down at any moment. Switching gears here. Psych! The Trompe Loewe party continues. For this one specifically, it looks like the dress was pleated at the bottom, possibly with a printed chiffon, because it has these differences in tone that I think happened when the sheer materials got layered on top of one another while they were scanning. Some people kind of alluded to this, but I just want to make this like totally clear. So in the first few looks, they came out and the Trompe Loewe pieces were on white models, and the clothes were being worn with a little bit of skin showing. So these were not just photocopied clothes the way that Margiela did it. They shot the clothes or scanned the clothes or something with a human body inside the clothes at the time. It seems like to me, to Bliss, that these were scanned with the models who ended up wearing them on the runway later. So where these clothes actually came from, we never actually figured out that in particular. But I do feel fairly confident that the models that were walking on the runway were also the ones wearing the clothes when they got scanned in. Another great comment here was that this might be a play or a critique on the fast-paced cycle of fashion where everything becomes a blur, even a dress. Another person pointed out that this was likely a reference to astigmatism, and as someone who has astigmatism in his left eye, confirmed, yeah. Another great quote about this: a fundamental synthesis of time is memory, comprises time as a pure past. By repeating an image of a dress in another piece of a garment, the dress is imbued with a new life, but a life that is a shadow of the previous one. It is by repeating something that what is repeated is rendered original, but also distant and dead. That was quoting from The End of Fashion, and they followed that up with, maybe this kind of garment palimpsest. Ooh, palimpsest, I haven't heard that word in forever. Palimpsest means a manuscript or piece of writing material on which the original writing has been affected to make room for later writing, but of which traces remain. Maybe this kind of garment palimpsest reaches the notion of the ghost within the garment. Similar to the previous collection, Spring 23, the designer is really pointing not to the cloth itself, but to the idea of it, the power of representation, the power of the image in the mimetic aspect, but still functional. The idea of repetition has even before been a subject of the house, this time through memory. Memory fades the material, the colors, creates illusions, but still keeps the idea of it alive. I have the greatest audience on earth. This is so great. Someone literally just casually wrote that. They sent the quote from that book and then casually wrote that while they were probably watching a movie or something. Like, y'all are the best. I love this. Someone else referenced warp printing techniques that are used in haute couture and pointed out that Raf wanted to use that specifically in his first Dior couture collection on the sterling ruby inspired pieces. It gives the fabric movement, and what he said was, I remember the vendor said in the Dior and I movie that it's very difficult to do with multiple colors. Incredible memory pointing that out from the Dior and I movie. Others pointed out that this really reminded them of the looks from Comme Fall Winter 2012, one of the best Comme des Garçons shows in history. Another person said this reminded them of like a skinny lady standing in front of a bright light and basically just turning into a silhouette. Like this skinny lady right here. And we're not done with the episode, but the final Trompe l'oeil comment, I saved the absolute best for last, which is, lol, this looks like an ice cream cake. The thing that I love the most about this particular runway analysis that we've done is that the vast majority of the comments were about these specific looks, and there was such a wide variety of interpretation for them. And I do think, I mean, we're gonna move on here in a second, but I do think that that speaks a lot to the fact that when you are looking at a piece of art, allow yourself to interpret it the way that your brain naturally wants to register it. Statements from the artist, statements from me, statements from other critics, statements from people who are experts. Those things are all valuable in their own little ways, but I think we all need to make a little bit of room for our own interpretation and how we feel about something naturally when we look at it. Because as this has clearly shown, there can be a lot of value in just someone who has a totally different perspective than you just looking at something and just saying what they see. Moving on. This is a little bit of an optical illusion. It's a shirt purse kind of. The chain on her shoulder is not actually holding anything other than the shirt up. One person said it's displaced clothing items being where they shouldn't be. Like here, it's a shirt that's hiding a bag, and then in another look, it's pants as boots, kind of a luxury upcycling idea. And I love this. This is so great. The most important thing to have with you is yourself, right? It reminds me of a purse because of the chain. Could it also be commentary on the materialistic trends like what's in your bag, where the you is created by showing things that you own and most importantly keep with you almost at all times, rather than your personality or your preferences or things about your life?
This feels so funny.
Great reading there. Another look that resonated with a lot of people was this one, which a ton of people jumped in to say, oh, it's tortoiseshell, which is often used for glasses. And then this was so much fun. One person just said, Minecraft lava block. And then he pointed to the colored blocks on the runway and was like, told you. And I gotta say, that is hard to argue with considering Jonathan Anderson's history. Like, I really was gonna dismiss this and was just kind of like, oh, come on, I have like hundreds of comments to get through here. No jokes, please. And I was like, well, Minecraft lava block. That makes more sense than the tortoiseshell thing to me. I don't know. And then there was my personal favorite looks from the collection, these ones that just had beautiful feathers in them. And many folks pointed out that this is a continuation of the Howl's Moving Castle theme that Jonathan started with his obsession with Miyazaki, and now an official collaboration that they're doing with Studio Ghibli. Another person pointed out that the feathers with those specific boots are very reminiscent of falconry gloves. And we'll end with my single favorite comment from dozens and dozens of people that saw this and then zoomed way in and said, there's a face. Can you see the face? There's a face. Do you think that's on purpose? There definitely is a face. Okay, wait. But the serious closeout needs to go to Oat Hadil, who runs an incredible fashion criticism page on Instagram. She's able to find references and sort of trace the history of certain aesthetics and different motifs within different designers' work. It's an absolutely brilliant account. I'm going to read you her take on the show in its entirety. Jonathan Anderson's collections always stand out in transforming fabrics and the way that we see it from its original form. He likes to play with silhouettes, dimensions of a garment when it looks flat, but in fact it's 3D, and 3D when in fact it's flat. His work at Loewe for me is the definition of slow fashion in terms of creativity and innovation. I love as well how his work really makes me stand for minutes to really digest the idea, craftsmanship, innovation, and really makes me appreciate it. This is what we need in fashion today. Beautiful words, Hadil. Thank you so much to everybody who participated. We got literally thousands of responses to this. I spent an entire week just posting these to my story and then checking comments, copy pasting, arranging, doing all this stuff. It took a lot more time than I thought it would. If you like projects like this, and if you love deep dive runway analysis that is frankly unlike anything else in the industry, you should join the Patreon. We only are able to do this because of support that comes directly from you all. I have no other job. I do not work for any other publication, and YouTube does not pay a lot. So if you get value out of this content, I really encourage you to go and support it with the amount that reflects the value that you get from it. Love you, mean it, bye.